The next item on our agenda today is House File 72, Representative Freiberg's bill. And I will move that House File 72 be held over for possible inclusion in the omnibus bill. Representative Freiberg, are you here if you want to start explaining your bill?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's good to be back in the State Government Finance Committee. So this is an issue that I started caring about when my kids were very little and we were sleep training them. So we'd finally get to a point where they were sleeping for a few hours and waking up at a reasonable time, and then the clocks would change for no particular reason and our schedule would get all screwed up. Now, this may not seem like the biggest issue in the world, but when you have a colicky baby and are completely exhausted, it was extremely frustrating. Studies have shown that these clock changes are bad for people's health and safety. So I became interested in getting rid of the clock changes. So assuming I was going to introduce a bill to do that, I had a choice to make. Should I move to permanent standard time, which is currently allowed under federal law and would mean that there would be an extra hour of morning sunlight in the winter, but less evening sunlight in the summer? Or should I move to permanent daylight saving time, also called advanced standard time, which is not yet allowed by federal law, but has already been passed in one state and has bills pending in several others? Now, doing this would mean that we would keep the extra evening sunlight in the summer. Ultimately, I decided to try the permanent daylight saving time approach. There are definitely people who support both options, and I believe you will hear from a person who supports the opposite approach today. But a few things led me to ultimately decide on this approach. So first of all, I haven't done a conclusive survey, but I think more people prefer it. A lot of people really like that extra evening sunlight in the summer for recreation activities and other purposes. Second, studies do suggest that this approach has several benefits. In your member packets, you should have an article that shows several benefits of permanent daylight saving time and cites sources to support it. Now, I won't read the whole article to you, but the benefits identified include improved traffic safety, a decrease in crime, energy savings, and increased opportunities for recreation and commerce. This bill has bipartisan support, and the approach to wait for federal law to change has the benefit of giving Minnesota businesses and residents time to adjust to the change rather than making it suddenly. I think a few people are here to testify on the bill, and I welcome your questions.
Thank you, Representative Freiberg. With that, I have a list of testifiers here. The first person on my list, and again, forgive me if I mangle your name, Latita Moreau.
Leticia, it means joy.
Leticia.
It means joy in Latin. It's a Latin word.
Thank you. Like I said, I apologize for mangling. Proceed with. Please identify yourself for the record and proceed with your testimony.
I had slides that I've sent. I don't know if the people can see it, but please follow them along if I cannot share them. So. My name is Leticia Moreau, and I'm honored to testify against HF 72. Thanks to my husband also who puts up with me following this subject in testifying. Thank you to the Minnesota legislature for giving me the opportunity to testify. Thanks for listening and helping to prevent a hurtful bill to pass. I named the HF 72, a bill, Dark Mornings bill. Maybe you could help to replace it with a great opportunity for health and climate, a bill with permanent natural standard time. The bill HF really could be called Dark Mornings Bill. This meeting started at about 8:15 a.m. and it was in daylight. It would have been in the dark with this bill. Sunrise was at 7:26. It would be at 8:26 with this bill. Imagine DST is like building a road and that people have to cross twice every year. HF 72 is like stopping people in the middle of the road and the traffic. Many Americans dislike time changes crossing the road. A majority prefer standard time, and there are polls that show that maybe haven't been seen. And standard time is a natural standard time when everybody's at maximum 30 minutes of solar time. And some Americans might buy into HF 72. perma-DST at first, but Science and History 1974 in particular, that the authors didn't mention, was an egregious failure that showed that they will probably hate DST in the winter, and because HF is a very unnatural and harmful way of addressing the problem of time changes, and rather than taking the hands of it, the problem man-made, it further is an overreach and creator of inequity. And it would increase the number of dark mornings and also require a change in federal law. St. Paul would have 88 days a year when the sun rises after 8:15 a.m., and Fergus Falls would have 110. This number increases as you go west because the sun goes from east to west. There is a better way to get rid of time change. Simply restore natural standard time year-round. Everybody within 30 minutes of solar time, that is Minnesota's current standard time. Doing so, 0 days of sunrises after 8:15. This is allowed by the federal law and could be done even this very March. And so HF is a nefarious bill, and why is it even considered? Some lobby hard for it. I quote the chairman of the National Association of Advanced Convents and Fuel Retailing in 2010. Third, in the 80s and then again in the 90s, NACS helped move up the daylight saving time. At the time, it was estimated it would have $1 billion in sales every year for the industry. That's tens of billions of dollars. Cents. You will hear claims of benefits, and people will omit to mention the history of 1974, and they will not pull comprehensive numbers. They will cherry pick interesting studies. For them, whatever benefits they're claiming, they are either false or they pale in front of the public interest. Many studies are cherry picked, modelized, and not real experience with the controlled population. America has a long history of bad messing with clocks, and recently there's been a blitz apparently under Florida's leadership. Tens of states' legislatures have been assaulted and rushed with similar bills. You can be proud of Minnesota because it has resisted since 2019. And a state like Washington has been fooled. And California is not done. It is wrong to say that it is on board. Last time I heard the PERMA-DST had not been passed. The Energy Committee in the Senate, it's been a year. It's been like not afraid of trying to pass. And I heard also from a lawmaker in Wyoming that passed the PERMA-DST last year, and it's writing a new bill to undo the error. I mentioned 1974. It's quite important and not mentioned by the authors, and there is an egregious precedent of permanent advance time. So this is DST in the winter. That was done in 1974 under Nixon, and it was a disaster, and it had to be rescinded within months. And people were hungry. The kids were killed on the way to on the way to school in the dark and waiting in lines in the bus for the bus. You will hear that DST saves energy, and that's a misrepresentation in the summer. And in the winter, that's even worse. Comprehensive studies, for example, in Indiana, show that the bills actually, home bills go by 1%, a significant 1%. And if in the winter, it could be 4% increase in heating bills. That's a Yale MIT study of 2008, widely shared and bizarrely not shared by the authors. And a full comprehensive study also must include the gas consumption. You've heard the NACS people saying they were happy to sell more fuel. So DST probably does not save. It shouldn't be called DST, daylight saving time. That's a seasonal future, and it will be worse in the winter in terms of heating, and certainly in Minnesota and probably in Florida. The bill is harmful to people. To public, while you can go natural times 365, the other choice that would be an opportunity. Age 72 is not permitted by federal law. Natural time is permitted. Many damages created by seasonal DST will not go away as time changes go away, but it will be increased if with DST in the winter. Please stop HF 72, a dark mornings bill, transform it into natural time 375. It would be good for kids' safety, for sleep, immunity, ingenuity, mental health, life, less disease, less cancer, smaller home bills, less carbon emission, It's good. Would be good for public health and climate. It could be put in place in March, and you could even protect the immunity against COVID-19. And this is not a personal opinion, and there are numbers also. This is a consensual opinion by science, equity, history, and it's a challenge to cover in a few minutes. Please check my sources attached in the documents and come back to me for questions if you need. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Moreau. Next person I have on the list, testifiers, is Jeff Kolb. Please introduce yourself for the record and proceed with your testimony.
Hello, good morning, Mr. Chair. Thank you for the opportunity to testify this morning. My name is Jeff Kolb. I'm going to apologize in advance. We are having construction done on the house, so I assume that the sawing and hammering will, it's been quiet so far, but I'm sure it's going to start right now.
As a retired carpenter, that's music to my ears.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Mr. Kolb.
Well, they're hanging cabinets today, so that's right up your alley. I don't have anything about anybody dying or anything like that in my testimony. I'm going to tell a quick story and then just share a couple of opinions here. We're going to flash way back to the year 2006 when I was much younger and working at the state fair for former Governor Tim Pawlenty as he was trying to be reelected there in 2006. And a woman approached and said, "What's the governor's stance on daylight savings time?" And the people I was with looked at each other and we kind of shrugged and said, I don't know, man. He's for it. I don't know. And she went on to this whole thing about how terrible daylight savings time was, and she only votes for people who are opposed to daylight savings time. And she gave us an earful, and she went on her merry way and enjoyed her bucket of donuts that she was eating. And we kind of made some jokes after she left. And then flash forward to a few years ago, it's a different world. And here I am nagging poor Mike Freiberg, telling him he's got to introduce a bill to get rid of daylight savings time because I hate the clock change. What happened in the meantime was I had kids. And so I like to say that I'd like to say that I'm here representing beleaguered parents everywhere. And I think Mike kind of mentioned this, or Representative Freiberg mentioned this in his intro. Kids are all about routines, right? And I've got two kids. There's a 7-year-old and a 4-year-old, just turned 4. You just get them sleeping, you just get them ready, and then suddenly somebody changes the clock on you and it's mass chaos again. You've got in your packet, I believe, and you've heard all of the arguments about why we should not change the clocks and why it's dangerous and why it causes problems. I'm just asking for some relief as a parent of small children and somebody who, has kind of enough to deal with anyway. Let's remove this one little thing from one little burden and just keep the clocks where they are. I don't have a strong opinion on which time you pick. Don't care. Let's just pick one, leave the clocks there. I will say I lived in Arizona for a few years. We didn't move our clocks. It was fantastic. I loved it. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. And the next person I have on my list is Mike Hickey. And if you want to identify yourself for the record and then proceed with your testimony.
Yeah, good morning, Mr. Chairman. Mike Hickey, just appearing as a citizen today, and really appreciate Representative Freiberg authoring this bill again. I think I showed up 2 years ago to just voice some support for this. So I'm glad we're back to this point. The bill has passed out of committee in the Senate. We may find a bipartisan moment on this bill this year, with all the other things we got to deal with. But it's appropriate. We're having this hearing right now. We're kind of coming out of our 3 months of very short days, or what I think of as our dark period. And I've looked too deep into this, Mr. Chairman, and maybe I shouldn't. I always thought our shortest day of the year from a sunset perspective was possibly a day or two. Well, I took a hard look at it. In 2019, we had 10 days of a 4:31 sunset in 2019. So it's not 1 or 2 days, it's 10. It seems bad. It seems like you're driving home in the dark. It seems like the only light you really get is on the weekend if you have to work. And it is that bad. It's 10 days. And so if this bill would pass, it would be 5:31, based, Lisa, what happened in 2019. It'd be 5:31 would be our shortest day of the year, with a little glimmer of dusk till 6. What a difference. What a dramatic difference. That's about what we're experiencing right now, kind of coming out of our very dark phase. But for people who are athletic, such as myself, want to get out there and try to run in this weather, cross country, ski, do other types of recreation, or simply just walk your dog, wouldn't it be nice to have more daylight every day, and to have the vast majority of days to have light beyond 6, and our shortest day of the year at about 6? I think it would make a huge difference to a lot of people's lives, and I sure appreciate Representative Freiberg continuing to advocate for this. I took a quick look while the hearing was going on. There are 13 states that have gone to this. Of course, it's triggered by a federal law change. And who knows, it might be a rare bipartisan moment in Washington, too, that they could get together on this. So anyways, I just want to urge you to support this. I really think it would make a huge difference in a lot of people's lives.
Thank you, Mr. Hickey. With that, members, are there any questions of the testifiers or of the Representative Freiberg? And I guess I have one question, Mr. Representative Freiberg. I know we've had this before and we passed it out, but why the difference between? I know you said it's you could go either way with this, and I understand that if we wanted to go with standard time, we could do that immediately. We would not have to wait for Congress to pass a law. So what was your reasoning behind picking the daylight savings time?
Sure. Thank you for the question. Personally, I don't really have a preference. I kind of agree with my constituent, Mr. Kolb, on this one, actually. My main interest is getting rid of the clock changes. However, in the past, I signed on to a bill to go on to permanent daylight saving time, and permanent standard time. And I did hear from quite a few people about that who really appreciate that extra hour of evening sunlight in the summer. I do know, like I showed you some study in your member packets, there's also an article that shows some of the benefits related to crime and the economy and so forth of the permanent daylight saving time approach, as opposed to the permanent standard time approach. Just for me, it was the combination of hearing from people and the research that I've done on this. Sure, I know there are some studies out there pointing the other way as well. In my opinion, it's slightly the one on the side of the bill I introduced, it somewhat outweighs the other side. But just generally the research I've done, the sense I have is that the people support the permanent daylight saving time approach. And I do honestly think making the switch immediately could potentially be more disruptive as well. And this way we do prepare businesses and residents for the change by waiting for the federal government to make the change. And I do think also this is the trend in other states, and we will be, by doing the approach that I'm suggesting here, we will be consistent with what's going on in other states. I think Mr. Hickey mentioned that 13 states have already looked into this. So, and I know there's lots of bills around the country. I think the National Conference on State Legislatures actually has a graphic showing which states have introduced bills, and I think most of them are following this approach.
Well, I have a list of questioners now. Representative Bonner. You're first.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and Representative Freiberg. My understanding is that there may be some data out there around, we've talked a little bit about the safety issue in the evening in terms of the evening commute, as well as children and their safety out and about in those evening hours. And I'm wondering if you could speak a little bit more to that particular issue. And if there's studies or information out there about the safety and efficacy of having that in the evening versus the morning?
Yeah,
Representative Freiberg.
sorry, Mr. Chair, thank you.
Yeah, I know it's. Go ahead.
I'd be used to it by now. In the article in your packets, I guess I'd just point you to that. The number 2 item there says that by having a permanent daylight saving time approach, crime would decrease. It says darkness is a friend of crime. Moving sunlight into the evening hours has far greater impact on the prevention of crime than it does in the morning. This is especially true for crimes by juveniles, which peak in the after school and early evening hours. Criminals strongly prefer to do their work in the darkness of evening and night. Crime rates are lower by 30% in the morning to afternoon hours, even when those morning hours occur before sunrise when it's still dark. A 2013 British study found that improved lighting in the evening hours could reduce the crime rate by up to 20%. So, that to me was fairly compelling. I guess maybe I'll just leave it at that.
Representative Bonner.
You're muted, Representative Bonner.
Thank you, Representative Freiberg. Also, there was a point about, we talked about the school bus and the kids and all that, but my understanding is by moving to this system, that means that when they're getting home in the evening, there would be more light, and when they're out playing and things like that. And my understanding is that there may be some additional safety gains here, in that there may be less children at risk in the evening, in terms of that the number of accidents goes down in the evening for children. Can you speak to that, or is that accurate?
Representative Freiberg.
Sure. Well, the reason I included that particular article in your packets is because it touches on a lot of these topics that get raised. And it points out that the evening rush hour is twice as fatal as the morning for various reasons. Far more people are on the road, more alcohol is in drivers' bloodstreams, people are hurrying to get home, and more children are enjoying outdoor unsupervised play. DST brings an extra hour of sunlight into the evening to mitigate those risks. Standard time has precisely the opposite impact by moving sunlight into the morning. I mean, essentially, by picking one approach over the other, I mean, you do have a choice to make. It's like, do you prefer the sunlight in the morning or the evening? And my sense is it's generally safer, and more people prefer the evening sunlight approach.
Representative Mason, move on to your question.
Well, it's just.
You're muted again.
What concerned me was the comments about school, because I have a bus stop right next door. So it really bothers me during the winter when I see the kids standing out waiting for the bus in the dark. And I mean, it's going to happen regardless, but my thought is if we do the daylight savings time, it means more times that they're out in the morning. And so I guess my thought that is my main concern is a safety issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Mason. The next person on my list is Representative Greenman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Representative Freiberg. I really enjoyed this conversation, and really appreciate, as somebody who is more of a night owl, I will definitely say really appreciate the idea of having a little extra time at night. And the conversation about schools, you know, when I went to South High School, we went to school when it was dark, under daylight savings time, or under the time shift. And then if you played sports or whatever, you left and it was dark and didn't have a lot of windows, and so never saw the light of day in the winter. And the idea of having sunlight until 6, having an hour or so getting home with sun is, I think, would have had a huge impact on us, and I can imagine having an impact on school kids. I will also say, in this pandemic, I don't know if folks have been walking more, but when the time shifted and suddenly it started getting dark much earlier, it sort of took that hour away of sort of after the Zoom meetings ended, to be able to go outside and take a breath of fresh air. So I would love this now, but really appreciate you bringing it and appreciate the bipartisan support. Thank you.
Next person on my list is Representative Groskowski.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Representative Freiberg, for bringing the bill. Contrary to some of the arguments around this very interesting topic, members, they still only make 24 hours in every day. I think the value to this, Representative Freiberg, I agree with you 100%, is just to eliminate the disruption. For me, the only thing I would wonder in picking one, as you pointed out, is what are the states directly around us doing? I think that is probably our biggest impact, or biggest, at least for me, the biggest decision point.
Representative Freiberg.
Yeah, I don't believe any of them have adopted this yet. I think there might be bills introduced in at least one of them, but I would need to probably double check the National Conference of State Legislatures website again and find that page. I can get that information for you, Representative Groskowski. I do think it's a good question. I do think we're in a better situation than some states as far as this is concerned, because we don't have any time zone boundaries in Minnesota. We're all within one time zone. So this change would be uniform across the state.
Ms. Moreau, I see you have your hand up. Quick answer. Do you have something to add to this?
Yeah, I would like to thank you for mentioning that the current standard time could be kept right now without change to federal bill law. So why wait? And I would ask why is Mr. Freiberg not talking about 1974? History tells the experience has been terrible, and I would also urge everybody to not rely on their personal experience too much, because it's very confusing, and this is why there are studies and scientific evaluations of the impact. And also think about the people of the West. They are much worse. Fergusville versus St. Paul, and you have to act for the public good, not for your personal interests. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Groskowski, do you have any more questions?
No, that pretty well does it, Mr. Chair. Thank you, and thank you, Representative Freiberg.
Thank you. I see no more hands up. Representative Freiberg, if you want to wrap up, and then we can lay this over for possible inclusion. Representative Freiberg.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. I appreciate the discussion. Certainly appreciate Ms. Moreau's passion on this issue. Like I said, my big goal in this is getting rid of the time changes. Based on the input I've received from Minnesotans, as well as the research I've done, I think the permanent daylight saving time approach is the preferable one. So really appreciate you giving this bill some consideration, and we'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Representative Freiberg. And with that, members, I'll lay this bill over for possible inclusion. And thank you, Representative Freiberg, and thank you, testifiers, for your time.